Have you ever wanted to write a book, or you know that your pastor, your leader should write a book, but you're really not sure where to start? This tutorial is for you. Hello, my friends. My name is Joanna LaFleur, and this is Word Made Digital Tutorials. In this tutorial, we're talking to Joy Eggerich Read, who is a literary agent and a speaker agent. She is an expert at how to go from the words on a page to a fully published book out in the world that people buy and are impacted by in real time. And so this is going to be an interview with her. She's recently written a book called Get to the Publishing Punchline, a fun and slightly aggressive 30-day guide to getting your book ready for the world. So she's, again, an expert at getting a book published, from the idea and concept you have in your head all the way to getting it published. And lots of pastors out there are wanting to write a book, whether it's self-published or whether it's published by a traditional publisher. You may be in that case, or you may know someone in your church community, like a leader or pastor who you serve under, who needs this conversation in their life. So enjoy the conversation with Joy Eggerich Read, but of course it wouldn't be possible without our sponsors, Canadian Bible Society and Compassion Canada. Thank you so much for sponsoring this tutorial. Joy, I'm so glad to have you join us for this tutorial today. You have just written a book because you are an expert on publishing, writing books, and how to get your work out to people. First of all, do you still think there's space for more books? It feels like lots of people are writing books.
Yeah.
Why should more people still do that?
Well, I think for an individual, the process of writing and getting something, whether it's a story or an idea, onto the page is a craft and an art form that you will feel good about if you do it well. And so whether that's for your own healing process, it's something to hand down to your kids, it's for your community, or it's a New York Times bestseller, the practice of writing really is healing and helpful.
And a lot of people say that they have a book in them. You know, I think it's one of these things, like they have this idea or they feel like they could write a book, or others have told them, especially if there's pastors listening, like people have told them you should write a book. Who do you think should write books? Maybe that's my next question. Does everybody have a book in them?
Well, that's why I wrote Get to the Publishing Punchline, because I think everyone has a story or an idea or a theory in them that they want to try to communicate better. And I felt like as a literary agent, I had people telling me this. And I work with people, I consult with people to help flesh out those ideas and figure, is this an actual book? Or maybe it's just a really long Instagram post, or maybe it's an op-ed or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe it really is better on stage. You know, I have Punchline Agency, and I say we represent people who are good on the page and the stage. I really do believe, and if your audience is largely pastors and leaders, that so many of those things go hand in hand. If you're an incredible public speaker, most likely someone's going to tell you you should write a book. And if you've written a really incredible book, most likely someone's going to ask you to come and speak. So I really feel like, yes, there should be more books in the world. I think the difficulty with the ease of self-publishing and so many imprints is that there's more stuff for us to filter out. And so I tell people, if you go through my book and you figure, yes, I do want to write this book, I do want to get it onto the page, I tell people you really do, if you want to get it into the world, then there is this piece where you are going to have to tell people, aka marketing, about your book, because no one's just going to come to your door and knock on your door and go, I was wondering, have you written a book? Do you have it in there that I could buy it? It's just the nature of living in the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, and the marketing thing, especially, people who are like ministry minded, who are listening to this, do you have just one or two practical things that marketing that doesn't feel slimy? What would be some ways that you've seen that done?
Yeah, I always tell people, I'm like, you don't have to, be an Instagram influencer and do some big partnership with a car dealership. That's platform building and marketing on one hand. But the other thing I like about the 21st century is so much of marketing can be relational. And at the end of the day, we're the only people, and God, that are going to know if we're being authentic in how we get the word out. But I think it also needs to shift a little bit, because there's so much noise and because there's so many people that were like, ugh, I don't really like how they do that, or ugh, I know I'm susceptible to kind of these things that are probably not great qualities. And so I want to shy away from it altogether. But on the other hand, I'm going, but if you are ministry focused and ministry minded, you are doing that because you want to help people. So then I would guess that the book that you want to write is also to help people. And so when you get onto stage and speak, you are telling people something that you're passionate about. Somehow somebody has told them to show up at the time that you are going to speak. So that's marketing. And so in the same way, like you're now speaking on the page, and someone, so maybe it's your team, maybe it's you, are going to have to come up with some ways just to let the world know. And again, only you know if that's icky or not, and you're doing the partnerships with the car dealership. Not that that's always bad either, but I think you just have to find some areas that are energizing to you. And it's not always what you don't like. It might just be growing a newsletter. It might be talking about your book from stage. But in the traditional publishing world, if you are to pitch to an agent or a publishing house, they do want to know that you have some understanding and some willingness to tell people that you've written this book.
I want to interrupt this conversation with Joy to remind you about one of our sponsors, Compassion Canada, and the amazing work that they're doing around the world. If you go to compassion.ca/good, you can find out all kinds of ways that they are getting involved in not just the COVID crisis that's happening right now in a global way, but also what they're doing day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year with the local church serving in communities around the world. You can get involved in this. There are some ways, whether through child sponsorship or through a creative solution, maybe through your own publishing, through your own writing, through your own storytelling, you want to get involved in impacting the lives of people around the world through your work. And we would love for you to check it out. If you see something on compassion.ca that you're interested in, we'd love to hear from you. So let us know, send us a DM and let us know how you're involved in Compassion. It's been a huge impact on my life. I've had the opportunity to see the work firsthand and begin to write about it myself, begin to tell these stories. There are more stories to be told around the world, and we'd love for you to get involved. Okay, back to the conversation with Joy. Right. Now, you've mentioned a few things here that I want to pull at threads of. The first is you're talking about self-publishing versus, the traditional publishing route. You have a big publisher behind you that's going to back the book. And I'd love to know what you think about both, because we're in an age where both are possible. So do you think there's a better way to do it these days? How do you make the decision about which way to head?
Yeah, that is a huge question. Yeah. And everything I've said so far, I would say applies to both situations. I think that, yes, again, you could self-publish and not tell anybody, but most likely people aren't going to be searching on Amazon for a book that they don't know exists in the world. And so I think, I go through my book, I have you ask 10 questions, and some are really practical questions, and some are like bigger, like what is the reason behind wanting to write a book? I think it used to be, one of the reasons there is a little bit of a stigma around self-publishing is that self-publishing was for people who can't get traditionally published.
Right.
That's not the case. I have gotten, probably the best traditional offer, advance, all the things I've gotten for an author before. We both talked about it later, and for certain reasons, that author, who has been published numerous times, decided for this particular book that they wanted to self-publish. And so there's many reasons for that again, I go into in my book, but some of them might be time sensitivity. It is quick. You can get out a book quicker through self-publishing. It still takes a lot of work and time, but a traditional publishing timeline is at least about 2 years. And some people just don't realize that. So a lot of the books that are by well-known authors that you might be familiar with around COVID and things like that, if you look, they probably self-published those because of the time frame. I always say, someone, in November of 1999 that wanted to write a book about Y2K had to self-publish.
You had one, you got 1 month, bud. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's tons of reasons that I talk about why you might want to do one or the other, but they definitely both have pros and cons. And as a traditional literary agent, most people in my position would not say that. We're kind of like, most agents are like,
because you don't make the same income if someone is going and
Oh,
doing it off
yeah,
on their own.
no.
You're hired
No.
to help people find a publisher.
Yeah, but because there is, and you asked a question earlier about like there's so many books in the world, do we need more? And yet there are tons. And so that's why I know I'm in this position where who I can get traditionally published. There's different factors that I'm like, I know if I'm going to spend the next 2 years working on this thing, I have to be super pumped on it. But two, did I say A and two? A and B.
A and two, yes.
Yeah. Because of the season of life I'm in, I have 2 little kids. There's only so many projects I can take on. And so if I feel there's some projects that I'll take a risk on, but if I'm like, I don't know, I will encourage people. I'll say, you know what, for this book, self-publish, because I've had, and then come back to me. I've had people who have self-published and been really successful at self-publishing. And this is another thing that kind of ties into marketing or platform building, that they didn't have a huge platform and then their book was actually good. That's why I always say, if you're going to self-publish, also self-publish something that's really, really good. And then this particular story that I'm thinking of, they sold 10,000 copies through self-publishing, and I was able to use that. I didn't say like, oh, this person has a big Instagram account, because they didn't, but they wrote a really good book,
right.
And that was huge for publishers. So then I was able to get them a 2-book deal where the publisher reprinted that book that was self-published, and they had a deal for an original title after that.
Wow. So, and what I'm hearing you say too, I think one of the things people think is if you want to write a book, you need a classic is you need huge Instagram following. What do you think is true or not? Like, what do people need in order to get a book out? You have to have if you're going to market a book, you have to have people to talk to about it. So is that true? Is that not true?
Yes and no. It's true in the sense of that if somebody with, let's say, Instagram or a podcast, has 1 million followers or 1 million downloads or whatever, it would be really easy for them to get a book deal, because traditional publishers used to have more of a risk involved. So they would maybe give 10 book deals to people, knowing that only 2 of those were probably going to be hits. Everything else might fail, but those 2 would cover the losses of the other 8. That's how much of a risk they were taking. Now, because they can do more calculations based on somebody's audience and going, okay, if they have 1 million Instagram followers, we know that at least X are going to buy the book, whether the book is good or not. And that's sad, because that means that a lot of just like rando people that have never had a book idea in their life are now just putting books out. It doesn't mean, we shouldn't get cynical, it doesn't mean that everyone with 1 million followers that puts out a book is putting out a bad book. Yeah. I'm just saying you increase, the publisher doesn't have to take as big of a risk, but they do increase the chance that maybe some of the stuff that they're putting out isn't that quality. Now, on the other hand, I've had conversations with traditional publishers and I've said, are you going to take a risk on people who potentially don't have a platform? And they said, yes, we will take a risk. What we're actually looking for, not always is it the people with the huge platform, but we're looking for someone that has some level of growth. So they might not have 1 million, but they might be really excited about someone who started a podcast 6 months ago and it's already taking off. Or maybe they had, 500 followers 6 months ago and now they have 5,000. That shows that whatever they're doing is growing. And that's something as an agent I can highlight and go, look, this person's active, they're doing something, people are catching on.
Okay, my last big question for you, because we haven't talked about it yet. I don't think everyone knows this. If you want to publish a book, you don't have to write the whole book before you go and try and pitch it. What do people, what is sort of the package that people create? And that's what you walk them through in your book. What is the package people create to then come out to market with an idea for a book?
Yeah, that is a huge misconception. It's not the end of the world if you have written the whole book, but I know lots of editors at publishing houses that are going, I really don't want someone to have written the entire book, because I want to be part of the planning and plotting of this book and help guide an author along. So with a book proposal, which you're right, is what I take people through and get to the publishing punchline. It's like, I know what needs to be there, at least what I look for. Not every agent is the same. Not every publisher is the same, but there's some essential things that can help you get noticed. And with that, typically people want to see 2 to 3 sample chapters, but they want to know that you have the whole outline to the book. So you have to take the time to work really hard on a proposal to go, I know where this is going, but I haven't written the whole thing, and I'm holding it loosely because if I'm able to partner with a professional publishing house, I'm open to letting them speak into how this goes because they know the industry, they know audiences, they know all of these things. Whereas if you come in with an entire book written, a lot of times publishers will know that maybe that author is going to be a little less flexible in letting us speak into an area that we are professionals in and we know.
Well, and the other thing you've said is this is a worthwhile process even if you self-publish.
Yes, yes. I mean, so many authors have said writing the book proposal was the hardest, like harder than writing the book. And I say, you know why? Because doing this process helped clarify so much your voice, your audience, if you were willing to market, all these different things that I take you through, so that then when you're writing the book, you have who you're writing the book to in mind. You know what your thesis is. You know what the chapter outlines are going to be, and it makes the writing process that much easier. So it is good when you're pitching to an agent or a publishing house, but I guarantee if you decide to self-publish, it really will make your book so much stronger and the writing process so much easier.
Joy, you're an expert. I hope more people write their books. I hope that they get your book because it just takes you through the process and it's so practical. So thank you so much for putting it out in the world so that other people can put their stuff out in the world.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? I wrote a book about writing a book.
Joy Eggerich Read, thank you so much for jumping in this tutorial to teach us from your expertise on publishing, this world that feels like a mystery to so many of us. You've made it a little more clear. So check out the links in the show notes if you want to know more about that. All these tutorials wouldn't be possible without sponsorship. And one of these sponsors is from an organization that believes in the most important book that has ever been published, the Bible, the Canadian Bible Society. We want you to check out biblesociety.ca for all kinds of resources. They've got resources and published work for you as an individual. They have all kinds of small group resources and video resources. They have resources to equip you as a leader, as a teacher of the Bible, as a pastor in the local church. They are here to support and equip you because this most important book that was ever published, the Bible, is alive and powerful and still affecting people today. And that's what the Canadian Bible Society is all about. biblesociety.ca for more information. And we will see you on the next tutorial.